Today I'd like to talk to you about very early Navajo or Diné squash blossoms. This is an example of one, and it probably dates anywhere from the 30s or 20s. We know it was collected early on, like in 1941, but it was probably an old piece at that time. The earliest Navajo squash blossoms had very little, if any, turquoise. Turquoise really didn't start getting put on until probably around the 1890s. Before that time frame, and squashes were made as probably as early as 1870s, they were just simple beads with a simple naja. The naja is this portion right here, which relates to the Spanish, and it's a crescent-shaped moon. Then you have things like this, which are pomegranates, which is also influenced from the Spanish. These early squash blossoms can be very valuable if you can find one, especially if it's attributed to somebody like Slendermaker, who has a very distinctive style of squash. So what you want to look at for the early pieces are very little turquoise, and if they are using turquoise, that they have very early bezels. The bezel is what keeps the turquoise in place. These are handmade bezels versus being something that's commercially made. Also, you would want to see that the beads, like this beads, are very smooth, that they've been worn and used. Usage is a very important tool in determining age. One of the things I see continually are squash blossoms that are brought to me that have old coinage on them. They might be barber head quarters or mercury head dimes, and the people always assume, because they have these early coins that may date from the 1910 or 1930, that it has to be from that time frame. The reality is that's very rare. I've only seen a couple of examples, and they did do this, but it's very, very rare. Most of these, if not almost all of these, were made in the 1960s and maybe 50s, but generally these things were a reproduction of an earlier type. So just because you have a squash that has early coinage on it, that does not mean that it's early. It just means the coins are. And that's a very important factor to know. So when you're dealing with squash blossoms, simple really relates to being early. The more simple it is, the more design qualities that use ingot, the silver that was made from coinage, then you're probably dealing with an earlier piece. When they get between 1900 and before, they get very valuable. So it's important to be able to try to date these things before you ever sell one or buy one.